The story of votes for women in South Australia is one of social justice, of determination in the face of discrimination, and an absolute belief in the value of political rights. South Australia distinguished itself as innovative in the early 19th century. Even so, while adult men, including Aboriginal men, gained the right to vote and stand for election in 1856, only women were still denied this right. However, progressive legislative changes began to separate a woman's legal identity from the archaic system. It was against this backdrop that several organisations dominated by women were founded. Working to improve the social and legal status of others, many of these women would later play a key role in the suffragist movement. Mary Lee, advocating an end to child labour and raising the age of consent from 12 to 16. Elizabeth Webb Nichols, rallying against alcohol, which brought poverty and domestic violence to families. Augusta Zaddo, advocating for higher wages and better working conditions for women. Agnes Milne, co-founding the first women's trade union. Catherine Helen Spence, supporting the establishment of the Advanced School for Girls, and together with Mary Colton, co-founding a society for destitute children. Rose Burks, establishing a mothers' union and women's guild. Serena Lake, arguing that gender equality was the original design of the Creator. They identified problems, organised themselves, and saw success through legislative reform and cultural change, but they were hampered by having to gain support from prominent men. They needed a vote of their own to elicit change. The Women's Suffrage League was founded with the aim of gaining equal voting rights. They were supported in Parliament by Dr. Edward Sterling, the first president of the Women's Suffrage League, who had already proposed a resolution to grant the vote for property-owning single women and widows. Although passed, it had no legislative power. The following decades saw 6 more unsuccessful attempts. Under 4 different premiers, the colony was not yet ready for change. As the 1890s rolled in, a nationwide depression meant many women had to gain work to support their families. Meanwhile, continued public pressure was helping the suffragists to gain traction and visibility. They crisscrossed the state on trains, gaining signatures on petitions that were eventually glued together to total over 400 feet in length. When the petition was presented to the Parliament by George Hawker on August 30, 1894, it had 11,600 signatures. Just weeks before, a bill was successfully introduced by John Gordon under Premier Charles Kingston, suggesting the time was right for change. This bill included a clause that prevented women from standing for Parliament. Attempts were made to undermine it, with known antagonist Ebenezer Ward proposing an amendment he believed would completely end the bill, that women should be entitled to stand for Parliament. However, on December 18, 1894, the bill was passed amid loud cheers, 31 votes to 14. 1 year after New Zealand won suffrage, South Australia had followed, giving all women, including Aboriginal women, the right to vote and stand for Parliament. Just over a year later, women exercised their rights enthusiastically, with those women enrolled voting in greater proportions than men. At the Nurrungeri mission at Point Macleay, many Aboriginal women insisted on enrolling and voting in the 1896 election, even though they were actively discouraged by the manager of the mission. There were more than 100 Aboriginal people on the rolls, and more than 70 of them voted that year. The road has been long, and there is still room for improvement. But today we celebrate this victory with pride. 125 years after suffrage was granted, the impact of our early suffragists on the social, economic and political fabrics of society cannot be ignored.